Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the Chief Creative Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.
The Sparkfile podcast may contain profanity and other adult content.
Please use your discretion.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I want to make or how I want to be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Welcome to the Spark File, where we believe that everyone is creative, but smart creative people don't go it alone.
I'm Laura Camion.
And I'm Susan Blackwell, and we are creativity coaches who help people fear less, create more, and bring their creative visions to life.
If you are an OG member of the Sparkfile community, welcome back, Sparkler.
If you're joining us for the first time, hiya, welcome, friend.
Know that just by listening to this podcast, you are joining a warm and wonderful clan of creatives.
But hold up, you may be asking yourself, what exactly is a Spark File?
A Sparkfile is a place where you consistently collect all of your inspirations and fascinations.
If you're like us and you're making stuff all the time, or you want to be making stuff all the time, you know, if you're not careful, your campfire of creativity can flicker out.
But don't despair. We're collecting kindling in the form of fresh ideas, images, and inspiration that spark creativity and pique curiosity to light a fire under our collective asses to make things like this podcast.
Or a prolific body of work that created opportunity and spread beauty far and wide.
Ooh. Every episode, we're going to reach into our spark files and exchange some sparks. And from time to time, we're going to talk to some folks who spark us too.
That means we have more sparks than we can possibly use in this lifetime, little sparklers.
That's the truth. So if something lights you up, please, we beg of you, we implore you, take that thing and make something out of it.
So without further ado, let's open up
The
Spark File.
The Spark File.
Laura Camion.
Yeah, Susie Q. Breaking news. This just in. We did that whole episode on Wordle.
We did.
Last week.
It happened.
And literally days before we're about to post that podcast.
Moments.
We are informed Wordle has been purchased by the New York Times. The Gray Lady, baby.
Congratulations. Is it Josh Wardle?
Josh Wardle.
Sold Wordle.
For what I understand to be the low seven figures.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, that'll do.
You know, it's interesting because that seems like a cultural phenomenon to me. And I'm like,
yeah,
does he deserve more? I have read nothing about this, but it won't stop me from speculating. Say that Facebook/Meta came to you and was like, I will buy that from you for $6 million. And the Gray Lady baby was like, I will buy that from you for the low 7 figures.
I'm going to go with the New York Times. And the reason I would, again, we're making this up, but the purity of the game, the New York Times has people who are word game fanatics, and a certain number of them who are behind a paywall, like they pay money just to have access to the games at the New York Times.
Yes.
I don't know. There's sort of a purity, like a pure love of these word games that it feels like it's the right place to be. Also knowing that it was a game, spelling bee or something like that, that his partner loves and it sort of inspired him to make the game. It feels like the right place to me.
Will the Wordle be behind a paywall now?
So interestingly enough, he came out with his statement and said, and it's going to remain free at the New York Times. And then the New York Times made a clarifying statement and said it will initially be free.
Oh, boy.
So yet to be seen, what does that mean? But obviously they had an agreement that at least for some period of time, it would still be free.
I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I feel like there's going to be a mutiny. There's so many people that love it.
Yeah.
And I subscribe to the New York Times online because I support journalism. But I know that, I just think about my mom and dad who enjoy it so much. And
I know.
Maybe I'll just get them a subscription. If it's behind a paywall, I'll just get them a subscription.
Yeah. Part of the love of it, I think, was also like the purity. So we'll see once it becomes commercialized. I read in this other article that he's like, you just would not believe the number of people who approach me that are like, you could put advertising on the side or you could have a sponsor. And they're just sort of obsessed with like, how do you monetize this thing? And he's like, I'm not in it for that. So in a way for him, like this is sort of like some unexpected icing on the cake to be paid for it. And he can hand it over to the New York Times and just let it go, let the world enjoy it and not think anymore about like some ongoing monetization of it.
There had to be a bidding war.
I didn't see any.
In the movie version, in my mind, in that screenplay, there's definitely a bidding war.
Who else? You think like Facebook or?
I feel like Facebook, they just want to purchase everybody else's creativity.
They do. They want some people to come back.
Barrett Foa, who you might enjoy on NCIS, told me the story that he was at a restaurant and he overheard a woman, like an Upper East Side woman. I'm probably getting this wrong. I'm on Facebook. My grandson is on Facebook. And whenever I hear Facebook, I always think I'm on Facebook. My grandson is on Facebook.
We're all on Facebook.
We're all on Facebook, or we're not. Laura,
oh, that's amazing.
That was your Wordle update. Laura, are you ready for a spark?
I'm so excited for a spark. What you got for me?
I feel like this spark is going to be right on time.
Sure, you think that, and then next week the New York Times is going to buy it.
I don't think the New York Times is buying this spark. Who knows? They might.
You think you're right on time.
I'm just going to tell a little telling tales out of school.
Okay.
Right before we pushed record on this episode of this podcast, right before we jumped into it, you started talking about you recently relocated from Florida to New York.
It's true.
And you were talking about how much you miss the nature of Florida, your trees, the sound of the owls.
I started to cry.
And you started to cry.
I cried because I heard something outside that sounded like maybe an owl. And then I reminded myself that was not an owl.
One of those New York City owls.
On this street, there are no owls. And then that led to just my memory of every time we would hear an owl, we'd go, oh, did you hear that?
I love that.
And there were so many trees. And when it was windy, it sounded like the ocean. So we would sit out back and just listen to the sound of the trees. And I love where we live in New York. Like, I truly love it. But I got to walk a few blocks to see a tree. Like, I got to go visit them. This has to be a special trip of like, I'd like to see the trees today.
Right.
And I go to a park nearby and soak it all up. But it's not like Florida. There's just the nature everywhere.
And how long did you live in Florida, Laura Camion?
Well, I never fully lived there. Like we had a home in Florida for 10 years.
You were bi-coastal.
I was bi-coastal on the East Coast, 2 places on the East Coast, New York and Florida, back and forth. And ironically, it wasn't until the pandemic that I was like fully 100% in Florida. I was not like traveling anymore, going back and forth to work in the big city.
So you were a part-timer in Florida, but for how many years?
For like 10 years.
Yeah. So you've clocked some Florida time. In all your time in Florida,
Mm-hmm.
enjoying all of that nature like you do, have you ever heard of the Florida Highwaymen?
No. Who are the Florida Highwaymen?
Have I got a spark
Is it
for
spooky?
you?
Highwaymen.
It's not haunted. Why are you trying to make this a
I don't
haunted
know
spark?
why. I don't know why
Is
the
it
Highwaymen
spooky?
sounds spooky.
I think maybe because the Highwaymen sounds like they could be bandits, or they could be from like some old ghost town.
Or like a Stephen King novel.
Or a Stephen
The
King novel.
Highwaymen.
Well, it's none of those things. But I do think it might just like scratch a little Florida itch for you.
Oh, I'm excited.
So it's a little bit timely that you were just crying before we recorded.
I'm such a baby.
No, it's sweet. So we frequently talk about how sparks are everywhere and how spark seeking, you can really cultivate that as a default setting. Case in point, I stumbled upon this spark on eBay.
What?
I was looking for landscape paintings on eBay.
Yeah, you were.
So I could paint monsters into them. As you know, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, I like to take a landscape or a tablescape painting that I buy at the thrift store or online, and then I like to paint monsters into them. So like if it's a picture of the ocean, I like to paint a little sea creature, or if it's like a snowy mountain, I'll paint a little snow yeti in there. It's just my favorite.
A little yeti.
A little snow beastie. So I was on eBay looking for some great landscapes that I could drop a little monster into, and I came across a listing for a landscape painting done by one of the Florida Highwaymen. And it just caught my attention and it piqued my interest. And so I wanted to bring it to y'all via the Spark File. And here I go. So sources for this spark include FloridaHighwaymen.com, an article on gardenandgun.com by Chase Quinn, a PBS documentary series called Florida Frontiers, a post on the FSU Special Collections blog, an article by Anthony Westbury for Treasure Coast newspapers, an article by Gordon K. Hurd in the New York Times, and audio and video pieces by Jackie Leiden on NPR's All Things Considered. Those are me sources. Let's get into this. So to tell this story, Laura, gentle listeners, we're going to travel back in time. Laura, I'm taking you back to Florida.
But also back in time. So this is like awesome.
We're going to the 1950s. Is it awesome? The Jim Crow laws are in effect.
Okay, not awesome.
Not great. There's segregation. There's voter suppression. And for a lot of people who were Black, they were looking at work in citrus groves and working in packing houses and other hard labor. So during this time in the 50s, in the segregated South, a young Black man named Alfred Hare was in school at Lincoln Park Academy, which was a high school. So Alfred Hare is a very gifted young man, described as not arrogant, but gregarious. His brother Donald said, Alfred didn't have a mean bone in his body. If he had $20, he'd gladly give it away. He knew he could make more. He was just unique. So by all accounts, Alfred Hare, super nice guy, fun, unique, generous. Alfred Hare's ambition was to be an artist, and his dream was to be a millionaire by his 35th birthday.
Okay.
So that's a little bit about Alfred Hare.
Giving his $20 away?
Yes, but still
right.
Generous, but also ambitious. And he has all those qualities. And in addition, all due respect, Alfred Hare was also a historical hottie.
Respectfully.
Who would play Alfred Hare in a movie? I'm going to say like a young Leslie Odom Jr.
Oh.
So cute. I'm looking at his picture right now. So
historical hottie.
Cute and so talented. Mm-hmm. So Alfred Hare had an art teacher named Zenobia Jefferson. And Zenobia Jefferson could see that Alfred Hare was talented. And I just want to take a moment. and talk a little bit more about Zenobia Jefferson, because here at the Spark File, we love a great teacher.
We love teachers.
We love a great teacher. Zenobia Jefferson was described as a beautiful spirit, always the teacher. To Alfred, she was the best artist, and she taught him how to be the best you can be. He really loved her. She truly was a beautiful soul. Those words were from Alfred Hare's wife and the mother of his children. So in 2003, Zenobia Jefferson told a reporter, so now we're traveling forward in time, not all the way to the present, but to 2003. Zenobia Jefferson told a reporter, it got to the point that we couldn't offer Alfred much more at Lincoln Park Academy. They didn't have the facilities, but I knew Beanie Backus. Enter the character of A.E. Beanie Backus. Beanie Backus was an established white painter of Florida landscapes.
Okay.
Beanie Backus's work, he was a beautiful painter. And in the early 50s, at Zenobia's urgings, Beanie Backus met Alfred Hare, determined that this young man had talent, and agreed to give Alfred art lessons. So thanks to Zenobia Jefferson, for the last year or year and a half of Alfred's high school, Alfred Hare was working and studying with this established Florida landscape painter in his beautiful studio. And again, you have to remember the historical backdrop. In an essay on the website FloridaHighwaymenpaintings.com, they said this: in the segregated world of 1950s Florida, not many opportunities were available for African American artists. Unable to show their work in galleries, which were typically whites-only venues for both customers and artists, Black artists had few options for marketing and selling their work. So that's what we're dealing with here. That is the historical backdrop. You could be the most talented artist in Florida, but because of the segregation, you couldn't show your work in a gallery. You couldn't even visit a gallery as just to visit or potentially to buy if you were Black.
Oh, and think of all the artwork that no one saw.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take heart. Take heart.
Okay. That's right. We're not done.
We're not done yet, because Alfred Hare had an idea. He saw that Beanie Backus, this white Florida landscape artist, was selling his paintings. Beanie was selling Beanie's paintings for $250 a piece. Alfred had a thought. If he painted 10 paintings and sold them for $25 a piece, he could make what Beanie made on a single painting. And so that's what he did.
Ooh. Gonna make those millions.
That's right. Alfred Hare was painting on what is called Upson board, which is typically a builder's material. He would buy a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet of Upson board, which was about $3 or $3.50 per sheet. And then he would cut it up, and he would get 20 paintings out of that without wasting any material.
Whoa.
And then he would frame the art with carpenter's trim or crown molding, which he could purchase for 7 cents per foot at the East Coast Lumberyard, which you can imagine is a lot more affordable than going to a framer. And he would take that framing material and he would maybe paint it white, maybe a little gold highlighting. So just like creative limitations on a budget.
Yes, so smart.
And then Alfred created his own approach to painting, which he called his fast style. So he would have 20 or 30 paintings that he was working on in his backyard, and they would be propped up against the trees or tacked onto the trees with nails, and he would just crank them out in an assembly line, just methodically and quickly moving from one canvas to the next. And he would like fill in the foreground, and then he'd do midground, and then he'd go background, and he'd fill in the skies and the waterways and create these vibrant landscapes for each unique work. I also read that he would work by color. So he would be like blue across all 20 paintings. And then he'd be like green across all the paintings. And the speed at which he was painting factored into the style of the art that he was creating. Alfred Hare was selling as many as 50 paintings a week and earning a considerable amount of money for the time, enough to buy himself a Cadillac. So he was just like cranking. Marshall Adams, the executive director of the Bacchus Museum and Gallery. So this is Beanie Bacchus's sort of legacy museum and gallery.
Mm-hmm.
The executive director said of Alfred Hare, he had the game plan, the vision, and the business sense to monetize his creative talents. Undoubtedly, he could have painted slower, but he decided to streamline many aspects of Bacchus's paintings. His critical review was whether people bought them or not. So basically, he's saying Alfred Hare had a plan. He had the vision. He had the business sense. He could have painted slower, but he decided, I'm going to streamline this. I'm going to paint very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not worried about critical reviews. The critical review that I care about is whether people buy my paintings or not.
So just commercial, like I'm not trying to prove to some art critic somewhere. If this resonates with a human being that's willing to pay me $25 for it, boom. Yes.
That means that the painting was a good painting.
That's right.
So then Alfred Hare would put those paintings into the trunk of his car and he would go and he would sell them. The art historian who is expert on this school of painting is this guy named Gary Monroe. Gary Monroe literally wrote the book on the Florida Highwaymen. And Gary Monroe said he didn't think that Alfred Hare ever sold a dry painting. They were sold before the oil paint had time to cure. So this is how fast Alfred Hare is working and how fast these paintings are being sold, like bam, 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 bam. And that crown molding, those frames that I was telling you about earlier, they didn't just frame the painting. Because the paintings were often being transported in the artist's car to be sold before the oil paintings were dry, the frames would sort of act as this structure to protect the painting so that it not only was a frame, but it also was sort of a separator to keep the paintings from like scratching each other, the wet paint or,
Wow.
So Alfred Hare had a plan.
Wow.
Those paintings would be sold out of the trunks of cars up and down the highway. First by the artist who had painted them, in this case, Alfred Hare, and then by a team of salespeople. And this artwork was sold to banks and motels and doctors and lawyers' offices and restaurants and businesses and the general public throughout Florida. And those paintings sold the same day they were painted, oil paint still wet, would go for $25 to $35.
Even to the places, like you said, banks and hotels and whatnot?
It's interesting. We'll get into it a little bit. This isn't in my Spark, but there was one of these guys who I believe he's still alive, and he was sort of the top salesman of these paintings. And he had a deal with the artist where he was like, I forget the exact numbers, but it was like the artist will get 70% and I'll get 30%. But if he could get the sale price up, he would keep the difference. So the artist would be happy and still get their 70%. And the salesman would get a little more off the top because he got the price up.
Wow.
Yeah. So everybody was sort of thriving around this.
Wow.
So around this same time, Beanie Bacchus, the white Florida landscape painter, was also mentoring another Black artist named Harold Newton, who was, according to everything I've seen and read and heard, a wonderful artist. And it is said that he was just a natural talent who was painting long before Alfred Hare. And his paintings are beautiful. They are beautiful. Laura, now I feel like since you've been pining for the nature of Florida, we're going to have to talk about getting you a Florida Highwaymen painting.
I'm on their website. I'm looking at images as you describe the image. Like, it's really wonderful. I highly recommend it if you're listening right now and your computer's there. Like, just pull up the Florida Highwaymen paintings.com.
For reasons that we'll get into, there's a pretty wide span of almost like styles within them. But we'll talk about why that is. So back to Harold Newton. Parallel to Alfred Hare, Harold Newton was experiencing a similar level of success. Harold Newton followed Beanie Bacchus's advice to focus on landscape painting. And Harold, like Alfred Hare, had quickly realized that there was a demand for this romantic Florida landscape painting. And Harold Newton also began selling them on the road, door to door, It's my understanding that he would sometimes do it from his bike. He would sell paintings from his bike.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's unclear whether Harold Newton or Alfred Hare first began selling their paintings from their cars, or if it was an idea that the two materialized together as they worked under Beanie Backus's mentorship. That's sort of a little bit fuzzy in history. But unlike Hare, who remember had his fast style,
Yeah.
Harold Newton was a slow and exacting painter, and he kept his production to a staid 4 paintings a day. Listen to me when I say that. By comparison, he was only making 4 paintings a day. It takes me months to make a painting. Months. As I said, Harold Newton's paintings are beautiful. Because he was only doing 4 paintings a day in comparison to Alfred Hare, that may seem like less, but because Harold Newton painted for decades, his output was impressive. His brother, Lemuel Newton, said, there's got to be a lot of them. Like there's a lot of these Harold Newton paintings in circulation.
You think so?
I do.
You think there's a lot of Harold Newtons in circulation, even though he painted less than Alfred Hare?
Yeah, because he painted for so long.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
More on that in just a moment.
Okay.
So, according to Wikipedia, Harold Newton is recognized by fellow artists for his technical inspiration, while Alfred Hare is considered the leader and the catalyst who set the tone for this group that was forming in the 60s. Word of what Alfred Hare and Harold Newton were doing and the success they were having soon spread, and an ever-growing circle of friends and family started joining them. Some people were assisting them with their paintings. Others were painting on their own. Still others were devoting themselves to building frames for the artists. Other people were taking on the role of the salesman. This expanding circle of friends, acquaintances, and family members continues to grow, and they found themselves creating opportunities where there were few opportunities. And in the process, they created this new style of art and a new style of selling art that has earned these artists a place in history.
Hells yeah.
So decades later, in 1995, the director of Florida's Museum of Art and Culture, a guy named Jim Fitch, dubbed this movement the Highwaymen Painters. Gary Monroe, again, this is the guy who literally wrote the book on the Florida Highwaymen. Gary Monroe would identify 26 artists, 25 men and 1 woman named Mary Ann Carroll as the key members of the Florida Highwaymen.
26, you said?
26 artists. And I think it's worth noting, I think that Alfred Hare and maybe a little Harold Newton were the only highwaymen painters to receive formal training.
Interesting. And the rest learned like from them.
Yeah, exactly.
And they knew each other as well and kind of all worked together, the two of them. They weren't like two competing artists.
No, it seems sort of like this loose collective. And what I can gather is if you expressed interest, say you were walking by and you saw that Harold Newton or Alfred Hare was painting in the yard. There's a thing, I think it was Mary Ann Carroll talks about how she noticed the flames on this guy's car. Mary Ann Carroll is, again, the one woman artist amongst this group of Florida Highwaymen. She noticed the flames on this guy's car and she was like, those look cool. And the guy was like, I'm an artist. I painted them, and reached into the backseat of his car and picks up a painting and says, I did this. Like, I'm an artist. And just because she expressed interest, that guy was like, do you want to do this? Do you want to learn how to do this? And that's how Mary Ann Carroll started painting with the Florida Highwaymen. Because she was like, that's cool. Who painted those flames? So I feel like there was just opportunity there.
Wow.
It seemed like there was a lot of mutual support.
It sounds like that. And it sounds, rather than like a scarcity mindset, it was the opposite. It was like, this can lift us all up. Let's all do it. Let's do it together.
That is the impression that I get from reading about it. But
has it been romanticized?
Have aspects of it been lost to history? I'm not sure, but it seems as such. And again, how did this group of people expand? Some people learned directly from Alfred Hare. Some people learned from watching Harold Newton paint. Some of these folks who became painters started as salespeople, and they would take a little paint kit with them on the road in case any of the paintings got scratched when they were wet before they could sell them, so that they could repair them instead of bringing it all the way back to the artist, having the artist repair them and taking it back. So they learned how to paint first by doing repairs on the road so that they could sell the paintings. But that's how they learned how to paint. And they continued on and became painters themselves.
What was the time period of them, the Florida Highwaymen, painting, or did they pass it on and now they're still painting? New generations of highwaymen are painting.
I'm gonna say it's been passed on, and there's people who are still doing this. Not as many. It's not as prolific, but I think it's still happening. There's some children of highwaymen that are still painting. Daughters that are still painting. That sort of thing. Yeah. So Gary Monroe, who's that highwayman expert, told the New York Times in 2019, it was like spontaneous combustion. Alfred Hare encouraged and welcomed all who had an inkling or expressed an interest in painting. There was no organization, no rules, dues, or business plan, just like-minded 20-somethings coming together. So that sort of speaks to what you're talking about.
Well, yes. And also I'm kind of astonished because in general, regardless of any of these details, the idea that like so many people are out there buying art, that you could go door to door and be like, hey, buy a piece of art. That seems extraordinary and unique in its own right. Do you know what I mean?
It's a little bit of a different time, like the idea of a door-to-door salesman. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, now you could definitely, like, you could buy art at TJ Maxx, or you could buy art for your walls, like kind of anywhere. But just this idea that people enthusiastically, from like individuals to like hotels and banks and businesses, yes, to all of it. It's very exciting.
I love it. I love the entrepreneurialism of it. I love the creativity of it.
Yes.
I love the creative limitations, working within creative limitations of it all. I love that, these are folks, again, Black people who are living in the segregated Jim Crow South. And without this creativity, they would be consigned to working in a citrus processing plant, like backbreaking work. And I just love that. Again, I don't want to romanticize it, but I just love the creativity of all of it.
Well, the ingenuity and the inventiveness of how fast can I do these and still, be proud of the work and still create something that people would want to buy and figure out a sales system. It's all extraordinary.
Yeah. So this, I feel like, touches on what you were expressing before we started recording today. The art of the Florida Highwaymen appeals to many people because it depicts a natural Florida that is disappearing or has disappeared due to development. And in the PBS documentary series, Florida Frontiers, highwayman artist Isaac Knight said that a lot of things that they painted and paint don't exist anymore. That for the painters who are still alive and painting, it's done from memory. Those landscapes they used to paint are now Walgreens, CVS's, and car dealerships. So they've captured a lost time and lost landscapes from the 60s, which I think is one of the reasons, Laura, that they have this gorgeous mid-century quality to them.
They sure do.
There's one that I will show you, and maybe we can put it up on social with the episode. Actually, it's not just one. There's several of them that I'm just like, it captures something that is so beautiful.
Oof, there are so many. And yes, Suze, I mean, okay, I'm really going to out me and Wes and our nerdiness. So here we go. We were just talking the other day about this very thing. Where our home was in a little area outside of Orlando called Winter Garden. And in the time span that we lived there was this bike trail that went like 30 miles in either direction. It was beautiful. But when we first moved there, if you went one way down the bike trail, it was literally like riding through these canopies of trees it was just nothing but trees and brush on both sides of the trail.
Beautiful. Yeah.
You could go miles like that. And then by the time we left Florida, like all along that trail, 4 miles on both sides of the trail had been cleared out of trees and homes built because people wanted to live right on the bike trail.
Oh my God.
And I was like, everyone wanting to live right on the bike trail changes the bike trail. I definitely had days where I would go for these bike rides. I'd come back in tears because I would be like, babe, they took down there's a whole new section of, big homes and condo buildings going up, et cetera.
To bring it back to the Florida Highwaymen, this was their stock in trade. This is what they were capturing in these paintings.
Yes.
And it's really fun to look at these paintings and just see all the different kinds of trees and vegetation and oceanscapes and sunsets and blue skies. And I just love them.
The different kind of trees too, like there's the palm trees, but there's also like 100-year-old oak trees and cypress trees and exquisite trees.
This PBS documentary, again, Florida Frontiers, in their episode spotlighting this group of artists, they shared this. While the Highwaymen are recognized as noteworthy artists, there is also the story of creative people making economic opportunities for themselves in a difficult period of racial segregation. And in that same doc, one of the original Highwayman artists named R.L. Lewis said, "The way I look at it is this way. If you got to survive, you'll survive. I don't care what it is. Tough times don't last. Tough people do. The art that you see was not art for the sake of art, to put beautiful stuff up. It was art for the sake of, in some cases, survival," which I have to say,
oh my God.
I don't love that people were in a situation where they felt like they needed to create to survive. But again, I love the creativity, the entrepreneurialism of it all. Like
that they turn to art to survive
I just love it.
You just don't hear that often, that it's like, well, I really needed to survive, and so I turned to my art.
Yes.
You hear the opposite. You're like, I have a survival job.
That's right.
And then I try to do my art outside of that.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. Exactly. So it is estimated that collectively, the Highwaymen painted and sold more than 200,000 paintings.
Oh my God.
And those paintings that once sold for $25, $35 out of the trunks of cars, paintings that you might have been able to snag at a yard sale or a thrift store for just a few dollars. Today, those paintings sell for as much as tens of thousands of dollars and hang on the walls of the likes of Michelle Obama, Shaquille O'Neal, Jeb Bush, and Steven Spielberg. Sadly, Alfred Hare did not live to see how honored and valued his art would become. In 1970, at the age of 29, he was shot and killed by a man in a bar, and he left behind his wife and 5 children. And there's a lot of speculation. There's actually a beautiful painting of the bar where I love this painting so much, but of the bar where this took place. And there's a lot of speculation about why that happened. And it was speculated that he was shot and killed by this field hand. And it might be because Alfred Hare, again, historical hottie, very easy with people, very easy with the ladies, and very successful, that somebody just took it the wrong way and got violent. So in 2019, the New York Times published a series called Overlooked. Mm-hmm. And the article begins, "These remarkable Black men and women never received obituaries in the New York Times until now. We're adding their stories to our project about prominent people whose deaths were not reported by the newspaper," which I love.
I love that Overlook series. I really do.
I loved seeing Alfred Hare in there. I was just like, oh, I wish that he could have seen like the impact
What
that he
he
had.
created.
Yeah, what he created.
Started.
So according to the
Oh,
website, FloridaHighwaymen.com, the Florida Highwaymen, a group of 26 African Americans, broke convention to paint beautiful, iconic landscapes. Originating in the mid 1950s, an era marked by racism and poverty, these self taught entrepreneurs mentored each other while they painted on basic materials like Upson board for canvases and crown moldings for frames. Local galleries shunned their work, so they peddled their art from car trunks along area roadways, hence their name. Their art freed them from work in citrus groves and labor camps, and they created a body of work that has become not only a timeless collection of a natural environment, but a symbol of determination and belief in oneself. The surviving Florida Highwaymen, now in their 70s and 80s, are an important chapter in America's culture and history, indeed, a national treasure. Their self-determination in the face of adversity remains an important story of perseverance, inspiration, and creativity. And you have to know, Laura Cami and the Florida Highwaymen are currently receiving national acclaim.
yay.
From a piece on All Things Considered in NPR back in 2013. I heard that as of 2013, Al Black is one of the few Highwayman artists who still paints outdoors, several canvases at a time. And it's this kind of assembly line technique that makes certain people question whether this is really art. But Al Black is certain that it is. And Al Black said, these paintings, these are some good paintings because I'm putting my heart into them. He also said that he can be down, and I love this. He can be down and out, but if he gets up and gets out and starts painting, things start coming to him and make him feel really good. And I was like, that is a good painting.
Yes, that is a good painting.
Make some art, change your mood.
We put the strangest criteria on things, like in order to make, I think, the definition of art so elusive. On the one hand, it can't be fast. It can't be like that easy or simple, or else
Right.
like that's not like sophisticated art with a capital A. But on the other hand, there's just as many people who are like, if it doesn't come easy to me, then I must not be meant for this. Like if it is too hard to do, it's just sort of like, my God, we just keep moving the target.
You know, I didn't write about it in my Spark, but those pieces on All Things Considered are really good because they talk about how to this day, there's still these shadows of segregation and how people dismiss or diminish this work because of the way that it was made. And I'm like, that is some old fucking racism. It's some bull fucking shit.
Yes, that is some bullshit. I am not arguing with you that there's some racism there, 100%. But I also think like it's just part of this game of art. Who gets to say what is art? Who gets to define who's an artist?
Yeah, fuck that
whose
shit.
permission you need, and then who gets to sort of put their stamp of approval based on how you made it, or who you are, or the color of your skin, or how old you are. I mean, it's all, there's a lot of bullshit.
I could argue that this art has even more value because of who made it, how they made it, and not only is it beautiful work, it also created so much opportunity for a growing community of people.
When you, if you like believe that you put, an artist puts their heart and soul into it, think of just how multidimensional that soul was that created that piece of art. There's so much going on there.
Yeah.
And there's so much that they're experiencing, and there's so much that they're overcoming, and it's all in there.
Yeah. So what do we make of it, Laura Camion?
Oof.
What do we make of it? These are some things I make of it. I love using thrift store paintings as a departure for other work. For instance, if you go to a thrift store and you see something and it has a great frame, but you don't necessarily like the painting, you could use that, even if it's just a print on paper. I've seen outsider artists paint over that and use that as their canvas. So it's a source for affordable materials. But if you're lucky, keep your eyes open. If you live in Florida, you might also get a real masterpiece.
You might find a real gem.
So don't paint on that. Don't put a
Yeah.
monster in it. But I'm a big fan of affordable materials.
Creative limitation, getting resourceful.
Yes.
100%.
The other thing that this reminded me of, and I always think of this with Linda Berry, who is an artist who I admire greatly, who I've studied with, and her teacher, Marilyn Frasca, have sort of handed down thinking about creating that I think is so wonderful. And when Linda Berry was in college at Evergreen State studying under Marilyn Frasca, Marilyn would have them making something like 5 paintings a week, in addition to like all this journaling. So they just had to make, which seems like when I first heard that, I was like, geez, that's so much. But when you think about what Alfred Hare was producing, there's something about making a lot of work will improve your work. Even if you're not doing it under a teacher or a guide, just making a lot of work will improve your work. I think whether you're a painter or a writer or whatever your work, a dancer, whatever it is.
Agreed. I think it improves your work. I also think it improves your mindset, because we have seen people pour over one thing, believing like this is my masterpiece and I'm going to obsess over every detail of it.
Yeah.
Versus when you're moving quickly, you're like, I really don't have time to obsess and overthink and question myself. I got to keep moving.
Yeah. Just as a painter, or if you draw, your muscle memory in your hands, they will gain confidence as you work. And to Laura's point, it will make you feel better.
Get you out of your head.
Yeah, get you out of your head. There's another thing, what if we make of it, that really stuck and lingered with me from the Florida Highwaymen. It seems like so much of the monetary value of art is determined by the story around it. So interest in this Florida Highwaymen landscape art escalated when Jim Fitch coined the term highwayman in 1995. So this was well after the biggest heyday. If you think about one of the very first sparks we ever did on this podcast, I talked about Hilma af Klint. At the time before Mondrian and Kandinsky were painting, Hilma af Klint was painting, but Mondrian and Kandinsky, who are considered two icons of abstract art, they died with their legacy secured because they lobbied for it during their lifetime. So it's a little bit who lives, who dies, who tells your story.
Yeah.
Eventually talent will out. And, we all saw Hilma af Klint's work at the Guggenheim, and her story eventually did get told. But there's something about the story around how you share the light of your work that makes people value it in a different way and assign like literally a different monetary value to it.
True. But I wonder, this guy,
Jim Fitch,
was he a white guy?
I don't know.
Because I do wonder if, when he came along, again, is there racism at play? Because did he come along and give them a name and a story and package it?
Like a stamp of approval.
I mean, and I want the paintings to be valued, but I'm just saying, again, who lives, who dies, who tells your story? And they had a fascinating story the whole time.
Yes.
Someone sort of packaged it. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are just a few, what do we make of it? And I love Al Black saying he can feel down, but he comes out and starts painting and it really helps him feel good. And also his assessment is, these are good paintings because I put my heart into them. I just love that. I feel like I should stitch that on a pillow.
These are gorgeous paintings, and they do capture the sense and the feeling of Florida and the mid-century. And I'm also just when you've been in that Florida weather for a period of time, I can feel it in my body, this sense of being outside all day long and painting. It's a very particular heat. Heat and the sun, and that these guys spent the day out there making 10 to 20 paintings is astonishing.
Yeah.
And a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. Suze, this was an amazing spark.
That's my spark. That's a little Florida spark. I hope it scratched a little Florida itch for you, Laura Camion.
Thank you. It did.
Timely.
It did. I do want one of these paintings. I'd like to just be able to sit.
You better save your money because now they're expensive.
I know. I see these prices. But I'm just like, I can get lost in one of these just looking at them and just full of happy Florida memories.
Yeah. So friends, I guess that's it. This episode of the Spark File was made on the lands of the Lenape people. And as always, we hope it put another bunch of sparks in your file. Hey, if there's a spark you'd like us to explore, or if you'd like to learn more about how to coach with us to bring your creative ideas to life, you can email us at thesparkfile@gmail.com or submit it through our website at thesparkfile.com.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, though, we're recording on the lands of the Lenape, but we just were speaking about the Seminole and many others, but I just know that I lived on Seminole lands.
That's right. Yeah.
And we'll even take your feedback, but you know the price of admission. First, you got to share a creative risk that you've taken recently.
You can follow us on social at The Spark File, and be sure to subscribe, rate, and 5-star review this podcast. It really, really, really helps other listeners to find us. Also, if you like this podcast, we do hope you'll share it with people you love. And if you didn't like it, we hope that you turn off this podcast and just take a long, peaceful drive down Highway 1, just like straight into the
no, don't listen to that. Don't even listen to that. Hey, but if something lights you up and gets your creative sparks flying, we are writing you a forever permission slip to make that thing that's been knocking at your door. It's your turn to take that spark and fan it into a flame.
You know, you got to take it
and make it.
Bye.
Oh, love you, Florida friends.
Love you, Florida. Support local artists. Bye.
Bye.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I want to make or how I want to be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the chief creative officer and chief marketing officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.